Russian Offensive Campaign Assessment, December 5, 2024. Angelica Evans, Grace Mapps, Nicole Wokoff, Olivia Gibson, Nate Trotter, William Runkle, and George Barros. December 5, 2024, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Click here to see ISW's interactive map of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and here to see ISW's interactive map of the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk Oblast. These maps are updated daily alongside the static maps present in this report. Click here to see ISW's 3D control of terrain topographic map of Ukraine. Use of a computer, not a mobile device, is strongly recommended for using this data-heavy tool. Click here to access ISW's archive of interactive time-lapse maps of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. These maps complement the static control of terrain map that ISW produces daily by showing a dynamic frontline. ISW will update this time-lapse map archive monthly. Note: the data cutoff for this product was 12 p.m. Eastern Time on December 5th. ISW will cover subsequent reports in the December 6th.
Russian Offensive Campaign Assessment. The Kremlin is continuing to suffer significant manpower losses to make tactical advances in western Donetsk Oblast at the expense of Russia's ongoing war effort and the medium-term viability of the Russian economy. The United Kingdom Ministry of Defense, UK MOD, citing data from the Ukrainian General Staff, reported on December 5th that the average daily Russian personnel casualties reach a new all-time high of 1,523 casualties per day in November 2024. 1. The UK MOD noted that Russian forces suffered just over 2,000 casualties in a single day for the first time on November 28, 2024. Russian forces suffered an estimated 45,690 total casualties throughout November 2024, and the UK MOD noted that November 2024 was the fifth consecutive month that Russian casualties increased. ISW has observed geolocated evidence to assess that Russian forces advanced at a rate of roughly 27.96 square kilometers per day and seized a total of 839 square kilometers in Ukraine and Kursk Oblast in November 2024. ISW previously reported that Russian forces suffered increased casualties in September and October 2024 as well, and that Russian casualties totaled an estimated 80,110 troops in exchange for roughly 1,517 square kilometers of gains in Ukraine and Kursk Oblast in those 2 months. 2. Russian forces have thus suffered an estimated 125,800 casualties during a period of intensified offensive operations in September, October, and November 2024 in exchange for 2,356 square kilometers of gains, or approximately 53 Russian casualties per square kilometer of Ukrainian territory seized. Russia's constrained labor pool is likely unable to sustain this increased casualty rate in the medium term, and continued Western military support for Ukraine remains vital to Ukraine's ability to inflict losses at this rate. U.S. officials reportedly estimated in late October 2024 that Russia's current recruitment rate was between 25,000 and 30,000 new soldiers per month. 3. Ukrainian military observer Petro Chernik stated on December 3 that the Russian Ministry of Defense MOD would have to increase its monthly recruitment rates from 40,000 to 42,000 recruits to 50,000 recruits in order to seize the remainder of Donetsk Oblast while maintaining their current casualty rate. For Chernik's statement suggests that Russia may have increased its recruitment rate in recent weeks, although this recruitment rate appears to be thousands of troops short of Russia's ever-increasing monthly casualty totals. The Kremlin's commitment to maintaining the theater-wide initiative in Ukraine and continuing to advance in eastern Ukraine has created dueling demands on Russia's labor pool. Additional efforts to increase Russian force generation rates risk further destabilizing the Russian economy, as Russia continues to grapple with domestic labor shortages and rising inflation. 5. Russians can either serve in uniform in Ukraine or work in Russia's domestic economy, but they cannot do both simultaneously. The Kremlin is unlikely to sufficiently meet its needs for labor in both the military and Russia's domestic economy in the near future. And additional months of intensified offensive operations in Ukraine in 2025 and beyond will only further compound Russian resourcing dilemmas. U.S. President Joe Biden's commitment to providing the remainder of available U.S. aid to Ukraine and the continued Regular provision of Western military assistance to Ukraine remains crucial to Ukraine's ability to continue defending against Russian offensive operations and inflicting unsustainable losses on the Russian military in 2025. 6. Russian Chief of the General Staff Army General Valery Gerasimov undermined the Kremlin's information operation to portray Russia's November 21st Orshnik ballistic missile strike against Ukraine as a defensive response to the U.S. permitting Ukraine to conduct strikes in Russia with U.S.-provided ATACMS missiles. U.S. officials confirmed that Gerasimov called U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Charles Q. Brown Jr. on November 27. 7. The New York Times NYT reported, citing unspecified officials, that Gerasimov told Brown that Russia had planned the Orshnik missile launch well ahead of the U.S. decision to allow Ukraine to strike military targets in Russia with U.S.-provided ATACMS. 8. Western media noted that Gerasimov also warned Brown about Russian military exercises in the Mediterranean Sea, but that Gerasimov did not explicitly mention that Russian forces would launch hypersonic missiles during the exercises. U.S. military spokespeople confirmed to Western media that the call occurred, but did not provide details on the conversation. Russian President Vladimir Putin and other Kremlin officials have notably attempted to use the Orshnik ballistic missile and its test launch on November 21st as part of an information operation that Russia is escalating the war in Ukraine in response to the U.S. lifting its restrictions on Ukraine's use of Western-provided weapons against military targets in Russia. 9. Gerasimov's statement to Brown, if accurate, directly undermined this ongoing information operation by admitting that the Orshnik launch was not connected to Ukrainian strikes into Russia with Western-provided weapons, as Putin explicitly claimed in an emergency address immediately following the strike. 10. Russian-North Korean military cooperation will likely continue to intensify in the coming months following the formal commencement of their comprehensive strategic partnership agreement on December 4th. North Korean and Russian state media reported that the Strategic Partnership Agreement ensuring international strategic stability and a fair world order between North Korea and Russia entered into force on December 4. 11. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un signed the Strategic Partnership Agreement in Pyongyang on June 19th, and Putin and Jong-un ratified the Strategic Partnership Agreement on November 9th and 11th, respectively. 12.
ISW has extensively reported on the strengthening of Russian-North Korean bilateral relations since late 2022 that began with Russia discreetly purchasing missiles and ammunition from Pyongyang, to then facilitating performative diplomatic engagements, and most recently resulting in North Korea's deployment of over 10,000 North Korean soldiers to fight alongside Russian forces in Kursk Oblast. 13. Russia and North Korea are likely to leverage the commencement of their strategic comprehensive partnership agreement to formalize and expand their avenues of cooperation in the coming months. Chechen Republic head Ramzan Kadyrov continues to publicly position himself as a defender of migrants and Russian ethnic minorities in opposition to other senior Russian security officials, suggesting that senior Russian officials may be increasingly divided over Russian President Vladimir Putin's efforts to promote an inclusive Russian civic nationalism that ensures interethnic and interreligious harmony in Russia. Kadyrov accused Russian Investigative Committee head Alexander Bastrykhin and Ministry of Internal Affairs (MVD) head Vladimir Kolokoltsev on December 5th of not fulfilling the objectives that Putin tasked them with in response to a case involving a Chechen minor accused of hooliganism in Moscow City. 14. Kadyrov criticized Kolokoltsev and Bastrykhin for failing to protect Russian ethnic minorities and accused them of not listening to the Russian public. 15. Kadyrov further claimed that Kolokoltsev ordered Russian law enforcement services to beat foreigners and drive them out of Russia, despite Russia's need for migrants and allies. 16. Kadyrov previously clashed with Bastrykhin in June 2024 over disagreements in addressing religious extremism in Russia, and Bastrykhin and Kolokoltsev have been outspoken ultranationalist voices advocating for crackdowns against Russian migrants and ethnic minorities. 17. Public disagreements between senior Russian officials regarding the role and treatment of migrants and ethnic and religious minorities in Russian society suggest that there may be an increasing opposition among certain Kremlin officials to Putin's long-term efforts to portray Russia as an inclusive and harmonious multicultural Russian state and foster civic nationalism instead of ethno-religious nationalism. 18. Key takeaways. The Kremlin is continuing to suffer significant manpower losses to make tactical advances in western Donetsk Oblast at the expense of Russia's ongoing war effort and the medium-term viability of the Russian economy. Russia's constrained labor pool is likely unable to sustain this increased casualty rate in the medium term, and continued Western military support for Ukraine remains vital to Ukraine's ability to inflict losses at this rate. Russian Chief of the General Staff Army General Valery Gerasimov undermined the Kremlin's information operation to portray Russia's November 21st Orshnik ballistic missile strike against Ukraine as a defensive response to the U.S. permitting Ukraine to conduct strikes in Russia with U.S.-provided ATACMS missiles. Russian-North Korean military cooperation will likely continue to intensify in the coming months following the formal commencement of their Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement on December 4th. Chechen Republic head Ramzan Kadyrov continues to publicly position himself as a defender of migrants and Russian ethnic minorities in opposition to other senior Russian security officials, suggesting that senior Russian officials may be increasingly divided over Russian President Vladimir Putin's efforts to promote an inclusive Russian civic nationalism that ensures interethnic and interreligious harmony in Russia. Ukrainian forces recently advanced in Kursk and northern Kharkiv oblasts, and Russian forces advanced in the Torets, Kurakhove, and Volodar directions. Russian forces are reportedly increasingly recruiting women for combat and logistics functions.
We do not report in detail on Russian war crimes because these activities are well covered in Western media and do not directly affect the military operations we are assessing and forecasting. We will continue to evaluate and report on the effects of these criminal activities on the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian population, and specifically on combat in Ukrainian urban areas. We utterly condemn Russian violations of the laws of armed conflict and the Geneva Conventions and crimes against humanity, even though we do not describe them in these reports. Ukrainian operations in the Russian Federation. Russian main effort. Eastern Ukraine, comprised of 3 subordinate main efforts. Russian subordinate main effort number 1. Push Ukrainian forces back from the international border with Belgorod Oblast and approach to within tube artillery range of Kharkiv city. Russian subordinate main effort number 2. Capture the remainder of Luhansk Oblast and push westward into eastern Kharkiv Oblast and encircle northern Donetsk Oblast. Russian subordinate main effort number 3. Capture the entirety of Donetsk Oblast. Russian supporting effort. Southern Axis. Russian air, missile, and drone campaign. Russian mobilization and force generation efforts. Russian technological adaptations. Activities in Russian-occupied areas. Significant activity in Belarus. Ukrainian operations in the Russian Federation. Ukrainian forces recently advanced within the Ukrainian Kursk Oblast salient. Geolocated footage published on December 4th indicates that Ukrainian forces recently advanced into central Dorino, southeast of Kornivo. 19. A Russian millblogger claimed on December 4th that Russian forces advanced near Malaya Lokhnya, north of Sudza, and are clearing the area amid continued offensive operations in the northern Sudzansky rayon. 20. ISW has not yet observed confirmation of recent Russian advances north of Sudza, however. Russian sources claimed on December 5th that Ukrainian forces are counterattacking southeast of Kornivo near Novoivanovka and Nikolaevo Dorino. 21 elements of the Russian 56th VDV Regiment, 7th VDV Division, and drone detachments of the 106th VDV Division reportedly continue to operate throughout Kursk Oblast. And elements of the 51st VDV Regiment, 106th VDV Division, and the 104th VDV Regiment, 76th VDV Division, are reportedly holding positions near Nikolaevo Dorino and Dorino amid ongoing fighting. 22.
Russian main effort, Eastern Ukraine. Russian subordinate main effort number 1, Kharkiv Oblast, Russian objective. Push Ukrainian forces back from the international border with Belgorod Oblast and approach to within tube artillery range of Kharkiv city. Ukrainian forces recently regained positions north of Kharkiv city amid continued Russian offensive operations in northern Kharkiv city on December 5th. Geolocated footage published on December 5th indicates that Ukrainian forces regained positions along Druzhby Street in southwestern Hlybok, north of Kharkiv city. 23. Official Ukrainian sources reported on December 4th and 5th that Russian forces continued offensive operations north of Kharkiv city near Vysoka Yeruha and Hlybok and northeast of Kharkiv city near Vovchansk. 24.
Russian subordinate main effort number 2, Luhansk Oblast, Russian objective. Capture the remainder of Luhansk Oblast and push westward into eastern Kharkiv Oblast and northern Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces continued offensive operations along the Kupiansk-Svatov-Kreminna line on December 4th and 5th, but did not make any confirmed advances. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces advanced up to 1 kilometer east of Krylyakivka, southeast of Kupiansk, west of Svatov, near Kopanki, up to 4 kilometers near Zeleny High, and on the northeastern approaches to Lozova. 25. ISW has not observed confirmation of these claims, however. Russian mill bloggers acknowledge recent Ukrainian reports that Ukrainian forces recently seized Novomlinsk, north of Kupiansk, and made similar claims. 26. One mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces first seized a tactical height on the western outskirts of Novomlinsk before attacking the settlement from the west and south. 27. Russian forces continued assaults northeast of Kupiansk near Sinkivka, north of Kupiansk near Dvorikna, east of Kupiansk near Petropavlivka and Kucherivka, southeast of Kupiansk near Novokrylyakivka, west of Svatov near Lozova, Pershatrovnev, and Zeleny High, southwest of Svatov near Harkivka, Novoye Harivka, and Druzyabivka, northwest of Kreminna near Makiyivka and Terny, southwest of Kreminna in the Serebryansk forest area, and west of Kreminna near Yampolivka, Zarikn, and Torsky on December 4th and 5. 28. A Ukrainian brigade spokesperson reported on December 5th that the Russian military command is using its manpower advantage in assaults in the Kupiansk direction to offset the poor training of Russian personnel. 29 drone operators of the Russian 16th Spetsnaz Brigade, Russian General Staff's main directorate GRU, reportedly continue operating near Zarikn. 30. Russian subordinate main effort number 3, Donetsk Oblast Russian objective. Capture the entirety of Donetsk Oblast, the claimed territory of Russia's proxies in Donbass. Russian sources reported continued fighting in the Siversk direction on December 5. 31. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces counterattacked in the Siversk direction, including northeast of Siversk near Bilohorivka, on December 4th and 5. 32. Artillery elements of the Russian Nevsky Volunteer Reconnaissance Assault Brigade, Russian Volunteer Corps, reportedly continue operating near Vasyakivka, southwest of Siversk. 33. Russian forces continued offensive operations in the Chasiv Yar direction on December 5th, but did not make any confirmed advances. 34. Russian mill bloggers claimed on December 4th and 5th that elements of the Russian 98th Airborne VDV division advanced into the northeastern outskirts of the Chasiv Yar, into the refractory plant in central Chasiv Yar, further into Novyi microrayon, eastern Chasiv Yar, in fields south of Novyi microrayon, west of Kalinivka, northeast of Chasiv Yar, and northeast and southeast of Chasiv Yar. 35. ISW has not observed confirmation of these claims, however. A non-commissioned officer of a Ukrainian company operating in the Chasiv Yar direction reported on December 5th that Russian forces are sending small infantry groups to probe Ukrainian defensive lines for weak points in order to infiltrate Ukrainian defensive lines and disrupt Ukrainian logistics networks in Chasiv Yar. 36.
Russian forces recently marginally advanced in central Toretsk and southwest of the settlement amid continued Russian offensive operations in the area on December 4th and 5th. Geolocated footage published on December 5th indicates that Russian forces recently advanced northwestward to Svitla Street in central Toretsk and westward in the Centralna mine waste heaps in central Toretsk. 37 Russian mill bloggers claimed on December 4th and 5th that Russian forces captured the Centralna mine in Toretsk, have nearly captured the entirety of the Zabalka microrayon in southern Toretsk, advanced north of the Ivanhard Stadium in central Toretsk, advanced into neighborhoods in northern and southern Toretsk, and entered Leonidivka, southwest of Toretsk. 38. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces attacked near Toretsk on December 4th and 5. 39. A non-commissioned officer of Ukrainian brigade operating in the Toretsk direction reported on December 4th that Russian forces are constantly conducting costly infantry assaults against Ukrainian positions in the Toretsk direction. 40. Ukrainian Luhansk Group of Forces spokesperson Major Anastasia Bobovnikova reported on December 5 that Russian forces continue to conduct preparatory mortar and artillery strikes before assaulting Ukrainian positions near Toretsk. 41. Bobovnikova added that Russian forces are slowly advancing in Toretsk, but are suffering a Russian mechanized battalion's worth of casualties each week. Elements of the Russian 1,487th Motorized Rifle Regiment, 51st Combined Arms Army CAA, formerly the 1st Donetsk People's Republic DNR Army Corps AC, are reportedly operating in Urivka, south of Toretsk. 42. Russian forces continued offensive operations in the Pokrovsk direction on December 5, but did not make any confirmed advances. Russian sources claimed that Russian forces seized Novopastinka, southwest of Pokrovsk, advanced toward Novotroitsk, southwest of Pokrovsk, and Shevchenko, south of Pokrovsk, and advanced south of Pushkin. 43. Russian forces continued attacking east of Pokrovsk near Myrolobivka and Promin, southeast of Pokrovsk near Lysivka, south of Pokrovsk near Dachinsk, Shevchenko, Pushkin, and Zoft, and southwest of Pokrovsk near Novopastinka on December 4 and 5. 44. The spokesperson of a Ukrainian brigade operating in the Pokrovsk direction stated that Russian forces conduct 40 to 50 infantry assaults in the Pokrovsk direction per day in groups of roughly 10 personnel. 45. The spokesperson stated that Russian forces conducted infantry assaults in groups of roughly 50 personnel several months ago, but changed tactics in order to avoid high losses.
Russian forces recently marginally advanced in the Kurakov direction amid continued offensive operations in the area on December 5. Geolocated footage published on December 5 indicates that Russian forces recently marginally advanced in southern Santsivka, northwest of Kurakov. 46. Russian mill bloggers claimed that Russian forces advanced in the fields east of Santsivka and near Stary Turny, northwest of Kurakov, and interdicted the H-15 Kurakov-Kostyantynopil highway, west of Kurakov and south of Stary Turny. 47. Russian forces continued attacking within Kurakov itself, northwest of Kurakov near Santsivka, Zoria, and Novodmitrivka, north of Kurakov near Beresky, west of Kurakov near Dakhny, and south of Kurakov near Doln on December 4 and 5. 48. Russian forces recently advanced northwest of Volodar amid continued Russian offensive operations in the area on December 5. Geolocated footage published on December 5 shows Russian forces raising a flag over central Romanivka, north of Volodar, indicating that Russian forces recently seized the settlement. 49. Russian mill bloggers claimed that elements of the Russian 242nd Motorized Rifle Regiment, 20th Motorized Rifle Division, 8th CAA, Southern Military District, SMD, seized Romanivka. 50. Additional geolocated footage published on December 5 indicates that Russian forces recently advanced into the northern outskirts of Uspanivka, northwest of Volodar, and likely seized Hanivka, east of Uspanivka, and the field south of Doln and northeast of Uspanivka. 51. One Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian forces advanced up to the outskirts of Hanivka, but not into the settlement, however. 52. Russian forces have yet to cross the Suki-Yuli River from the north, although Russian forces crossing the river in this area will further complicate Ukraine's defensive positions in the pocket south of Vasiliy High and east of Trudov, both south of Hanivka and Uspanivka. Russian advances in Uspanivka and Hanivka indicate that Russian forces have successfully leveraged the seizure of Doln to circumvent and flank the eastern half of the Antonivka-Uspanivka-Suki-Yuli line from the north.
Russian mill bloggers claimed that Russian forces also advanced in other areas of the Volodar direction. Several Russian mill bloggers claimed that Russian forces advanced up to Vasiliy High, are consolidating positions in Kostyantynopolsk and Suki-Yuli, both northwest of Volodar, and clearing Ukrainian forces from positions near the Yelizavetivka forest area, east of Vasiliy High and Suki-Yuli. 53. Other Russian mill bloggers claimed that Russian forces advanced up to 750 meters in Kostyantynopolsk and advanced in an area 650 meters wide in southern Suki-Yuli. 54. ISW has not observed confirmation of these claims, however. Russian forces continued assaults north of Volodar near Yelizavetivka and Romanivka and northwest of Volodar near Hanivka, Uspanivka, Konstantinopolsk, Sukhili, and Roslav on December 4th and 5. 55 elements of the Russian 68th AC, EMD, are reportedly operating south of Romanivka. 56. A Russian millblogger amplified footage of elements of the Russian 200th Artillery Brigade, 29th CAA, Eastern Military District, EMD, striking a bridge across the Sukhili River just south of Yantarn, northwest of Vuhledar. 57.
Russian forces continued offensive operations near Velika Novosilka on December 5th, but did not make any confirmed advances. A Russian millblogger claimed that Russian forces advanced on the east, right, bank of the Mokry Yili River south of Velika Novosilka. 58. Several Russian sources claimed that Russian forces, including elements of the Russian 37th Motorized Rifle Brigade, 36th EMD, seized Blahoden, south of Velika Novosilka. Although one Russian millblogger instead claimed that Russian forces advanced within the settlement but have not seized it. 59. Ukrainian Kortitsia Group of Forces spokesperson. Lieutenant Colonel Nazar Voloshin stated on December 5th that Ukrainian forces pushed Russian forces out of Novyi Komar, north of Velika Novosilka, on December 4th, although Russian sources claimed on December 5th that Russian forces maintained positions at least within the northern part of the settlement. 60. Russian forces continued attacking near Velika Novosilka itself. North of Velika Novosilka, near Novyi Komar, northeast of Velika Novosilka, near Rozdoln, south of Velika Novosilka, near Blahodatin, and Makarivka, and southwest of Velika Novosilka, near Novodarivka and Zelene Pole on December 5th and 6th. 61. Reconnaissance elements of the Russian 1,461st Motorized Rifle Regiments, reportedly assigned to the 35th CAA, EMD, are reportedly operating near Zolotaniva. Elements of the 14th Spetsnaz Brigade, Russian General Staff's main directorate GRU, are reportedly operating near Velika Novosilka. Elements of the 60th Motorized Rifle Brigade, 5th CAA, EMD, are reportedly operating near Makarivka, and elements of the 40th Naval Infantry Brigade, Pacific Fleet, EMD, and 5th Tank Brigade, 36th CAA, EMD, are reportedly operating near Blahodet. 62. Russian supporting effort, Southern Axis, Russian objective. Maintain frontline positions and secure rear areas against Ukrainian strikes. Russian forces continued offensive operations in western Zaporizhia Oblast, near Robotyne and Novodanilivka, north of Robotyne, on December 4th and 5th, but did not make any advances. 63. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command reported on December 5th that Russian forces are conducting troop rotations, training exercises, and reconnaissance in the Heliopole and Orikhiv directions in preparation for future offensive operations in these directions. 64.
Russian forces continued assaults in the Dnipro direction on December 4th and 5th, but did not make any confirmed advances in the area. 65. Mykolaiv Oblast Military Administration head Vitaly Kim stated on December 5th that Ukrainian forces have been preparing for a possible future Russian attempt to cross the Dnipro River to the west, right bank for a long time, and that Ukraine is prepared for such a scenario. 66. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command reported that advancing onto the Dnipro River Delta Islands remains a priority for the Russian military command and that Russian forces continue to unsuccessfully assault the islands. 67. Russian air, missile, and drone campaign, Russian objective, target Ukrainian military and civilian infrastructure in the rear and on the front line. Russian forces conducted a series of drone and missile strikes in Ukraine on the night of December 4th to 5th. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that Russian forces launched 2 Iskander-M ballistic missiles from Rostov Oblast and 44 Shahid drones and other unidentified drone types, likely referring to decoy drones, from Oryol and Kursk oblasts. 68. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that Ukrainian forces downed 30 drones over Kiev, Kharkiv, Poltava, Sumy, Chernihiv, Cherkasy, Kirovohrad, Zhytomyr, Vinnytsia, Khmelnytsky, and Odessa oblasts, that 12 drones were lost, likely due to Ukrainian electronic warfare, EW, interference, and that 1 drone flew into Belarusian airspace as of 0830 local time. Ukrainian officials reported on December 5 that Russian drone debris damaged power lines and homes in Kiev Oblast and that Russian forces struck residential buildings with 2 guided glide bombs in Kharkiv, Sumy Oblast. 69. A Russian mill blogger claimed on December 5 that Russian forces struck the Berehinya agricultural enterprise with an Iskander ballistic missile in Myronivka, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and that Russian forces struck a Ukrainian military airfield in Uman, Cherkasy Oblast. 70. ISW has not observed visual confirmation of these claims, however. Ukrainian source Army-Inform reported on December 5 that Ukrainian forces utilized F-16 fighter jets to defend against large-scale Russian air and missile strikes in Ukraine once in August 2024 and twice in November 2024. 71. U.S.-based human rights organization Physicians for Human Rights, PHR, and Ukrainian human rights organization Truth Hounds published a report on December 4 detailing how Russian forces have damaged or destroyed roughly 780 Ukrainian hospitals and clinics and killed roughly 244 healthcare workers in strikes targeting Ukraine's healthcare system since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. 72. The report noted that Russian strikes targeting hospitals and their internal power systems became increasingly common between February and September 2024, and that Russian forces significantly intensified strikes targeting healthcare facilities in October 2024. PHR and Truth Hounds reported that 31.7% of reported Russian strikes on Ukrainian health facilities directly targeted the facilities, while an additional 37.8% of the reported strikes targeted energy infrastructure facilities that directly impacted healthcare facilities. PHR and Truth Hounds reported that 92.3% of Ukrainian healthcare workers reported experiencing power outages in healthcare facilities as a direct result of Russian strikes on energy infrastructure, with 26% of workers reporting daily electrical outages in their facilities. 73.
Russian mobilization and force generation efforts. Russian objective. Expand combat power without conducting general mobilization. Russian forces are reportedly increasingly recruiting women for combat and logistics functions. Ukrainian Kortitsia Group of Forces spokesperson Colonel Nazar Voloshin reported on December 5 that Russian forces primarily use women in communications and support functions, but that Ukrainian forces are increasingly observing women fighting in Russian storm assault units comprised of penal recruits. 74. Russian technological adaptations. Russian objective. Introduce technological innovations to optimize systems for use in Ukraine. Russian forces are reportedly planning to use fiber-optic drones to conduct strikes and reconnaissance deeper into Ukrainian rear areas. A Ukrainian soldier operating in the Kupiansk climate direction stated that Russian Telegram channels claim that the Russian military intends to fly drones with 15 to 20 kilometers long fiber-optic cables into Ukrainian rear areas to complicate Ukrainian logistics. 75. The Ukrainian soldier noted that Ukrainian electronic warfare, EW, interference does not impact Russian fiber-optic drones. ISW has observed reports of Russian forces operating fiber-optic drones in Kursk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia oblasts, reportedly with cables up to 10 kilometers long. 76. Activities in Russian-occupied areas. Russian objective. Consolidate administrative control of annexed areas. Forcibly integrate Ukrainian citizens into Russian socio-cultural, economic, military, and governance systems. ISW is not reporting on activities in Russian-occupied areas today. Significant activity in Belarus. Russian efforts to increase its military presence in Belarus and further integrate Belarus into Russian favorable frameworks and Wagner Group activity in Belarus. Belarus and Russia continue to pursue Union state integration efforts. Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko in Minsk, Belarus on December 6 to discuss a common electricity market for the Union state. 77. Lukashenko drafted Union state agreements on unspecified security guarantees and on the export of oil on December 4, and Putin accepted the draft on security guarantees on December 5. 78. Note: ISW does not receive any classified material from any source, uses only publicly available information, and draws extensively on Russian, Ukrainian, and Western reporting and social media, as well as commercially available satellite imagery and other geospatial data, as the basis for these reports. References to all sources used are provided in the endnotes of each update.